this is a 4-to-1 ratio, so 400 grams of black powder meal to 100 grams of rice hulls. Just about right. It is. I still have a few that you can see, so they're not completely coated. But that's about where I want it. Some people will mix it 3-to-1, others will mix it 7-to-1, meaning 700 grams of black powder, 100 grams of rice hulls, versus 3-to-1 is 300 grams of black powder meal to 100 grams of rice hulls. The 3-to-1 ratio you see way too much, in my opinion, of the rice hull. I like to put a little more in it. I don't like to go 7-to-1 just because there's a lot of waste. But I feel like this right here, you'll have a good burst, but you'll also won't have you won't have too much fire coming back down to the ground. So I'd coat it 4-to-1, 400 grams of black powder meal to 100 grams of rice hulls, if not 5-to-1. Supposedly with bigger shells, so if you get up to the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 inch shells, which I haven't done, don't do, supposedly you can coat them a little bit lighter because you don't want an extreme burst. Also with this, if this is not quite enough to burst a shell, which it should be, you can put in maybe 4 to 5 grams into a 3-inch, 4-inch round shell of whistle mix to supplement. So you may have more of like a, if you were to mix it 7-to-1, which is really heavy on the black powder, you may have the same burst as just mixing it to like 4-to-1, like I have here, putting this in a shell and then supplementing another maybe 6 grams of whistle mix. You'll have the same burst, you'll save money. The shell will be much lighter, much lighter, so you can throw it a bit higher. So this is my black powder coated rice hulls. Black powder is just the traditional. I'd mixed it probably about 4 hours. 75, 15, 10, potassium nitrate, charcoal, sulfur. And then I added maybe about 3%, maybe 4% dextrin. Actually mix this stuff up, probably 3% dextrin, which is the binder. Let it dry a little bit, and then I mixed the last 150 grams of black powder to make it the 4-to-1 ratio. But I used a little bit higher concentration of dextrin in the last 150 grams. That way the exterior of these will be a little bit easier to work with. I'll have to measure it at the end, but I believe 4-to-1, so if I did 400 grams of black powder to 100 grams of rice hulls, it should weigh about 500 grams total, a little over a pound then. I'll have to measure it at the very end. Right now it's pretty weighty because there's a lot of moisture in it. I also don't over-soak it. If you over-soak these things, it's pretty easy to over-soak it, and then the rice hulls just start sticking together, which drives me nuts. I don't like it when I've got a ton of rice hulls that are just stuck together. You'll find at the bottom of this, I'll screen it, but at the bottom of this, I'll probably have a little bit of black powder that hasn't bound to the rice hull, and it's kind of bound to itself, so like 7FA black powder at the bottom of this, where it's just tiny little beads of black powder. So this is my process. This is a homemade bowl that I've made in a mixer out of a, what do you call it, a hoverboard. And I've rigged it up. As you can tell, I'm turning it pretty slow right now. I can crank it up if I want. I like to run it at just a little bit slow. And also, if I crank it up and put a lot of weight in it, it starts to lag. so I find I have to crank it up slowly. I like to run it slow at the end just so I can really get my hand in there and fill it. Make sure it's not sloppy on my hand, but more dry. Right now I'm mixing it more than I need to, but it was pretty much done a couple minutes ago, but figured I'd just... Maybe the next batch I will try to do start and finish. This is by far the biggest batch I've ever done. And I hate to do a massive batch only to realize I made a small calculation error and then ruin a giant batch. Example being I made 500 grams of, what was it, yellow star mix, and it's just, I'm not happy with it. That's an expensive mistake to make. So I'm kind of discouraged about that. So yeah, that's my stuff. I'll try to burn it later on. So this is my end product. I just dumped it all out as all I've done. So what is this? I use a small mesh screen. I don't know if that's like 100 mesh. Let's see. 120 mesh plus, so it sits on top of the 120. And I used a really fine screen. Sorry. 150 mesh to catch the fines. A lot of these are actually rice holes that are just fine rice holes. I didn't take the time to screen out the fines prior to starting the process because I just don't think it's worth the time. And then this, so this is 150 plus, meaning it sits on top of the 150 screen. This, I just call it a 150 minus because this falls through the 150 screen. And as you can see, most of this is just excess black powder, but it's not black powder mill. This stuff is like slightly granulated. You can mill that back up, or I can try to throw it back into here. Throw this in, wet it, throw this in, and then throw this in. To me, it's just not worth it. I think I will just hold on to these fines, hold on to this. Maybe I'll throw this back into the ball mill after it's dried up. All of this black powder I've used today is excess black powder, meaning, what did I use? I granulated black powder and I ended up with a ton of fines. It was kind of when I first started making black powder. And with all those fines, it's hard to find a spot to use them for, or a shell to use them in. I like the heavier granulated, larger diameter 2FA or 2FFA, whatever it's called, in the shells, less waste that way. So I ended up with a ton of fines. I ran low on potassium nitrate. I'm bone dry on chemicals, and so of course I wasn't keeping track of stock, and so I really wanted to make up a new batch of this stuff, so I ended up just grabbing a lot of my, gosh, it's probably like this stuff that was going through a 180 screen or something, and even 1100 screen, and threw it back in the ball mill with lead media, of course, and then I milled it back up into a fine so that I could use it for this. And now I need to buy some more chemicals because I am out, and hopefully I don't have to scavenge anymore because I'm tired of that. And then this right here is my drying rack. Not ideal, definitely needs some work, but it's basically top of a bucket. Those are the fines. Not ideal to have the heat right next to that, obviously. Usually I'm not running heat though, I'm just running air. I'd like to eventually put a pipe or something to where I'm getting this quite far away from my drying rack because I don't like the setup. But I can throw in as many of these screens as I want, and I can dry, I've dried up to like 5 or 6 at one time. But I tend at the very top, put something like this, or I'll just take a lid, goes over the top, that when I turn this on it hovers, so it keeps some back pressure. And I'll run it usually with just air if I'm worried about ignition. Obviously this is not the safest setup and I need to work on it. But I can also run it with heat if I want. With a blow dryer, you can turn on heat 1, heat 2 kind of a thing. It gets pretty hot though, so I wouldn't recommend that. It seems like Last night, me running something like this, I just ran it for maybe 15 minutes, and it was surprising how hard those set up. And that was on heat 1. Right now, I'm just gonna, quantity-wise, it's a lot, so I'm just gonna run it on no heat, just plain air. I've got it set up to a timer, just in case I were to forget to check it. We'll run that for maybe 30 minutes.